Hello everyone, welcome to today's story. What if the person you love most suddenly forgets you? Not because of choice, but because of fate. Alex was ready to propose to Lytuna, holding the ring that could change both their lives. But a single phone call pulled him away, and in that gap of time, tragedy struck. A sudden accident erased all of Lytuna's memories, including every moment they had shared. When they meet again, will her heart still recognize him? Or will Alex be nothing more than a stranger in her eyes? Stay with me until the end to find out. And don't forget to subscribe so we can reach 1,000 followers together. The morning unfolded with a rare stillness, the kind that makes every sound seem sharper, every breath heavier with anticipation. Alex stood by the window, holding the small box in his hand. Inside lay a simple yet elegant ring, a promise he had rehearsed in his mind countless times. Alongside it, he placed Lytuna's phone, forgotten at the farm the last time she visited. Today, he told himself, he would bring both. The thought of her always drew him back to that quiet place. The smell of damp earth, the sound of chickens clucking somewhere beyond the wooden fence. It was not the grand gestures of love that stirred him, but the way her hands moved when tending the garden, the faint crease on her forehead when she was lost in thought. He imagined her surprise at the gift, her fingers hesitating before slipping the ring on. Would she smile shyly, or would she avert her eyes, as she often did when emotions were too close to the surface? The questions lingered, making his heartbeat quicken. The morning sun climbed higher, painting the world in soft gold. Alex took a deep breath, slipping the ring into his pocket, the phone into his bag. Every step toward the farm felt like walking into a different chapter of his life, one that might end in joy or in silence. He didn't know which it would be, but he knew he could no longer keep the words inside. Today, he would speak them. The sun was already warm when Lytuna stepped outside, her sleeves rolled to the elbows. The air carried the mingled scents of soil, animal feed, and the faint sweetness of ripe fruit from the trees beyond the fence. She moved with quiet efficiency, scattering feed for the chickens, checking the pig's trough, leaning over the pond to watch the fish rise in lazy swirls. Her mind was full, but not with dreams. It was the steady list of tasks that shaped her days. The small repairs the coop needed, the baskets of vegetables that should be ready for market soon. She thought of taking her child with her to town, then glanced at the sky, the sun already too fierce, the air heavy. No, she decided. It would be better to leave the little one with the elderly neighbor nearby. At the doorway, she brushed her palms clean and adjusted the child's hat before handing them over. The baby's laughter echoed briefly, then faded into the hum of the morning as she stepped onto the dusty road. The market list was tucked in her pocket. Her steps were brisk, purposeful. Yet there was a softness in her eyes when she passed the rows of cassava and the low stone wall she and her father once built. The farm was more than work. It was the map of her life, marked by seasons of planting and loss. She didn't know that just beyond the bend, the day was already bending toward an unforeseen twist, one that would scatter her memories like leaves in a sudden wind. When Alex reached the farm, the gate stood closed, the lock catching a glint of sunlight. He paused, listening for the faint rustle of footsteps or the low hum of her voice, but the yard was silent. The stillness pressed against him, heavier than he expected. He sat on the wooden bench by the porch, the ring box turning slowly in his palm. Each click of the hinge as he opened and closed it seemed too loud, breaking the fragile quiet. He imagined her walking toward him, surprise on her face, perhaps a question in her eyes. In that imagined moment, words would come easily. But reality intruded in the form of his phone buzzing, a sharp, insistent vibration. He answered, and the voice on the other end carried the weight of urgency. The cargo ship, his shipment, trouble at sea, damage, loss, potential disaster for the business he had built. He closed his eyes briefly. The choice was no choice at all. Responsibility demanded his presence, even as his heart begged him to stay. He slipped the ring back into his pocket, stood, and cast one last look at the quiet farmhouse. "I'll come back," he murmured, as if the walls could hold the promise until he returned. The road back to his car seemed longer than before. Every step an argument between duty and desire. He drove away with the window down, the wind carrying the scent of the fields, and wondered if the moment he sought would still be waiting when he returned, or if it would slip through his fingers like sand. The road to the market was narrow, lined with dust-coated hedges and the occasional motorbike passing too close. Lytuna kept her eyes forward, mind skimming over what she needed to buy. The heat pressed down, thick and unyielding, and she thought briefly of her child safe in the shade with the neighbor. Then came the sound, a sharp screech of tires, the guttural growl of an engine too close. She turned her head just as a motorbike swerved, the world tilting in a blur of sun and shadow. Impact stole her breath. The ground rose to meet her. Then everything folded into black. When she opened her eyes, the ceiling above was white, the air sharp with antiseptic. A voice, unfamiliar, asked her name. She searched for an answer but found only emptiness. The question repeated, softer now, but still she could not reach anything beyond the hollow inside her mind. Faces leaned over her, strangers all. Words like concussion and memory loss floated in the air, but they meant nothing. She was released from the hospital with instructions she couldn't hold on to, clutching a bag of medicine she didn't remember accepting. The streets outside felt foreign, the light too bright. She walked without direction, following the rhythm of her own footsteps because it was the only sound she could trust. Every landmark might as well have been drawn in water, gone the moment she tried to focus. Somewhere behind her, a life she could not recall waited. Ahead, the road bent into uncertainty. The afternoon heat clung to her skin as she wandered, the dizziness from the accident still blurring the edges of her vision. Somewhere ahead, a woman's voice broke the monotony, sharp, urgent, and laced with fear. Lytuna turned just in time to see a young woman stumbling toward her, hair tangled, eyes wide with desperation. "Help me, they're chasing me," the stranger gasped, her voice breaking. Behind them, shouts rose, the pounding of footsteps drawing closer. Lytuna didn't think. Instinct pushed her forward. She pulled the woman toward the shadow of a narrow alley, guiding her behind a rusted gate half hidden by overgrown vines. The pursuers appeared seconds later, rough voices asking questions, scanning the street. Lytuna kept her own gaze low, shaking her head when they asked if she'd seen anyone. After a tense pause, they moved on. When the last echo of their steps faded, the stranger exhaled shakily. She introduced herself as Tu Quinn, explaining between breaths that she had been running for what felt like hours. Her knee was scraped raw, and she winced with every shift of weight. "Come with me," Tuna heard herself say, though she wasn't sure where "me" was anymore. Yet there was a quiet certainty that she could not leave this girl alone. They walked together, one supporting the other, until they reached a small rented room that felt vaguely safe. The air smelled faintly of dust and warm rice. Tuna fetched a basin of water, cleaned Quinn's wounds, and set a small pot of porridge to cook, the motions automatic, as though her hands remembered a life her mind could not. Steam curled upward from the pot, carrying with it the quiet comfort of boiling rice. Tu Quinn sat on the low stool, watching Tuna move about the room with a calm that belied the emptiness in her gaze. When they finally spoke, it was in fragments, pieces of two lives frayed at the edges. Quinn spoke first, her story halting. A dispute with dangerous men, a hurried escape, nowhere safe to return. Tuna listened, nodding, though each word seemed to pass through her like wind over water. When she tried to answer in kind, only shards emerged. Flashes of another time, a younger self standing in a kitchen, the weight of a child in her arms, voices raised in rejection. The memory stung without context, leaving her unsure if it was truth or invention. The image of a man, indistinct, blurred, hovered just beyond reach. Elsewhere, far removed from this quiet room, Alex sat in a conference space clouded with tension. His colleagues spoke in urgent tones about seawater in the cargo, the cost of delays, the risk to their reputation. He took notes, made decisions, set plans in motion. But beneath the veneer of control, his mind wandered back to the farm, to the unopened conversation, to the ring still hidden in his jacket. He had no idea that Tune's absence was not a matter of timing, but of memory, that even if he returned tomorrow, her eyes might meet his with the polite distance reserved for strangers. The porridge was ready. Tuna ladled it into a bowl, setting it gently before Quinn, as if serving warmth could bridge the unspoken void between them. Late in the afternoon, light filtered through the thin curtains, painting the floor in bands of gold and shadow. Tuna handed Tu Quinn a folded set of clothes, soft, clean, smelling faintly of sun-dried cotton. "You should change," she said quietly. Quinn hesitated, but the kindness in Tuna's tone left no room for refusal. While Quinn disappeared behind the screen, Tuna sat by the window, eyes on the narrow strip of road outside. She didn't know what she was waiting for. Perhaps a face she might recognize, a sound that might unlock the sealed rooms of her memory. But the road stayed empty, except for the hum of cicadas and the distant bark of a dog. Far away, Alex stood on a balcony overlooking the city port. The air smelled of salt and metal. He held his phone, thumb brushing over Tuna's contact. But the thought of hearing her voice, even just to say he'd be delayed, brought a strange weight to his chest. He promised himself he would return, that the ring would not stay in its box forever. Back in the room, Quinn emerged, her hair damp, her shoulders relaxed for the first time that day. "Thank you," she murmured. Tuna offered a faint smile, one that carried warmth but no recognition of who she once had been. The sun dipped lower, and in that quiet, the distance between Alex and Tuna was no longer measured in miles, but in memories. One holding on to them, the other having let them go without knowing. And so, the distance between Alex and Tuna is no longer measured in roads or time, but in memories, one clinging to the past, the other living in a present where that past never existed. Will love be strong enough to cross a mind wiped clean? Or is this the beginning of two lives moving in parallel, forever close, but never meeting? Only time will answer. If you want to know what happens next, make sure to follow and subscribe. Let's reach 1,000 followers and continue this journey together.